evening. This is the October 21st, 2021 Hopkinton School Committee meeting. My name is Amanda Fargiano. I'm the Vice Chair. I am sitting in to host this meeting for our Chair, Nancy Kavanaugh, who is joining us beside me remotely, and she cannot be with us today. So she's participating, but I'll be running the meeting. And at this time, I would like to invite all those who are willing and able to stand and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Does anyone here have a public comment tonight? Okay, seeing no public comments, we will move on to recognitions. Do we have any recognitions tonight?
I do. I have a couple of recognitions.
Excellent, Dr. Kavanaugh.
If you just take a look at the slide on the screen, I did want to recognize Jennifer Suker, who is our Director of English Language Acquisition, Equity and Access, and she has put together the very first LPAC family event. And so that LPAC event is coming up on Saturday. It's at 12:30, and it's just very exciting that, you know, we have finally come this far. You know, the state requires that we have an LPAC, and we've been working very hard to get one up and running, and so here it is.
That's great. And sorry, just for anyone who can't read the small print, you want to say what LPAC is?
Oh, yes, of course. So LPAC, the family get-together that you see up there, the highlighted text stands for English Learner Parent Advisory Council, and if I'll just tell you a little bit about it. So it is an outdoor event for families of English learners and former English learners. So even if you have a child who is no longer in an English learner program, you're certainly welcome to attend. It's going to be held at the Marathon Elementary School on the playground in the back. The date is this coming Saturday, October 23rd. It'll run from 12:30 to 2:30. The rain date is the same time on the 24th. And you can simply email, it's going to be hard for you to see that, Kate, who is our new admin assistant in that department. But if you want to just email and let people know how many people are coming from your family, that would be great.
Excellent.
And my second recognition is just the school nurses. They've been, I think, pretty much heroes with the Test and Stay program. We had learned that CIC would be sending us people to sort of staff and support our nurses, almost really to run the program. And just like anywhere else, the national labor shortage is impacting that. And so our nurses have kind of taken over, and they're doing, I would say, the lion's share of the work. So thank you to our nurses.
Excellent. Any other recognitions for tonight? Okay. And that brings us to reports. I think we have a student council report. Welcome to our student council members.
Thank you. My name is Jessie Ainelli. I'm a senior at Hopkins High School. I'm the student council. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about what student council has been up to. We had our successful volunteer subcommittee ran their school cleanup last Friday, and we all walked around Loop Road and around the campus and cleaned up trash, which was really fun and successful. Nice to see that we had people come out for that. We've finalized our Spirit Days, which is exciting, and we're now working on games and schedules for pep rally, although we're not sure what form that will take, but we're going to plan anyways. And the publicity committee sent out our first student council newsletter, and we got some really great engagement and feedback from that. We included a poll asking what Spirit Days students wanted, and we got a lot of great responses, so that was helpful. And they've also launched their new website, which is exciting and is called the Student Hub, and it has just all the information that a student may need. And also, as you can see, we sent out a survey to the entire student body at the high school in anticipation of this meeting, so we're going to share those results with you guys too. Overall, as you can see, most of the students were in favor of going mask optional. Approximately 68% of students, which was 506 students, voted in favor of the mask optional policy, and 28%, or 207 students, voted against it. Also notable, 27 students chose the other option, but most of those responses were in favor of the mask optional policy, but just wanted to clarify that only vaccinated individuals would be able to remove their masks. So we received a total of around 740 responses out of approximately 1,216 total students at the high school. So that's almost 2/3 of the students responding to the survey, which is probably like the biggest engagement we've gotten with a survey ever at the high school. So that was
Congratulations.
Yes,
Yes,
students are definitely, they have a lot of opinions on this and want their voices to be heard, which is great.
It's great.
Hello, my name is Ryan Darbenga. I am a junior at Hopkinton High School from Student Council. And as you can see in the survey result, we also have them on paper if you want to pass them around too. This is a very valuable piece of data because, as you can see, two-thirds of the student population was surveyed through this form. And usually, like Jesse said before, we only get like around 1/2 or just a bit above that. And this is a really good statistic because it validates the data that we have a big sample size of the survey. To dissect the results of the yes option and the no option, in the responses that we included in the form, we had to explain like we had an option, like if you said yes, why? If you said no, why? In the yes option, most of the students were, in the no option I'm going to start with, the students that said no, the biggest reason that they said no was because of the going into the flu season, and also kids believe that masks will help stop the spread of the flu too. Another reason is they didn't want to expose their younger siblings to unvaccinated people or to vaccinated people because they're vulnerable to COVID-19. They're also scared of future breakthrough cases and variants upcoming in the year. That's another concern. And those were the main big 3 reasons for why students voted no. For the reasons that they voted yes and that they're comfortable with implementing a mask optional policy is because, first off, as we covered in the last school committee meeting, there has been such a high vaccination rate in the high school, which is, I believe, if I recall, 98%. People also say that they will still have the option to wear the mask if they don't want to. Like, if they want to keep on wearing the mask, they're welcome to do so. And it is not necessary or vital, so it should be a personal choice to wear a mask, yes or no. That's what they feel. They also, generally miss seeing people's faces and people's smiles. And it's really hard to communicate when you're wearing a mask, like as I'm speaking right now. So also like they experience like outdoor environments such as like stores and like public areas. Some of them don't mandate masks, so they feel that like the school should not mandate the mask policy as well. And also, if I recall, I said in lunchtime, students take off their masks completely and they sit no social distancing, like completely next to each other, and they still communicate, and so far has been going great. So even if we still have like a mask mandated policy, it wouldn't affect that much since students still take off their masks during lunch. This will also encourage the few people that are unvaccinated to get vaccinated, because like if we implement a mask optional policy, like they'll maybe get encouraged to progress them into becoming vaccinated, but we're not sure about that. Overall, I think this survey is a very good piece of data, and it should be considered in the consensus regarding the mask optional policy of the school. That is all I have to say. If you guys have any questions, please let me or Jesse know.
Committee, do you have any questions?
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for bringing us the student view. It means a lot to us.
It really does, and I like the elaboration on the no's and the yeses. That's really, really good data.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I know it's a quick turnaround. I remember at the end of the last meeting, you got this idea to do a survey, and I'm happy to see it actually happened. Curious, like, how did you do? Was it like a iPhone survey, or it was via? How did you distribute the survey?
So the student council officers have admin to distribute emails throughout the whole school to a student body. So all I did was I made it on the Google Form app. I made a Google Form new one, and I labeled it, HHS School Committee Mask Optional Policy, and I included yes or no, and I said why. And then with the results, we made a pie chart, as you can see. And this pie chart gives a clear idea of what the students want. So I think it's a really good idea, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. It would be a missing gap without it. People would wonder, so thank you.
Nancy, do you have any questions for the student council reps?
No questions, but I very much appreciate the survey, as others have said. So, and excited for some of the things coming up, including pep rally. So, thank you.
Yeah, not just echo my colleagues. Next time I have a survey, you guys are in charge, because that is a phenomenal response rate. So
Thank you.
Well done. You kept it short and sweet, and
Yeah.
you let people say their justification. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for this. You're all set, so we're going to move on to the Superintendent's Report. Dr. Kavanaugh.
A little bit slow loading. All right, so this is the Superintendent's Report for Thursday evening, October 21st, 2021. The first topic we'll be addressing tonight is enrollment, and I think people at home will be interested to know that the MSBA, because of the Elma project, has done some demography work for us, and they have shared with us some enrollment projections as well. So you know that we have them from Dr. Arthur Wagman historically, and now we will also have them from the MSBA, which is nice. So the numbers that you see on your screen right now, those are just the updated numbers on the students who are being educated outside the Hopkinton Public Schools, except for preschool at the bottom, but they don't usually appear in the K-12 grids that we get from, from DESE or from MSBA. So you can see we have 24 students who are being educated at Keefe Tech, 4 at Norfolk Aggie. At Assabet Valley, we've got 1 this year. 8 students who have left us to go to charter schools, 25 students who are in out-of-district placements, and 81 students currently at our preschool. It is predicted that our preschool attendance will be growing next year, and we may be opening a 6th classroom, I think, at the Marathon School. That is on the horizon. The counts are still being done, but we think that there's a strong likelihood that will happen. All right, and again, I show you this each week. Right now we are at a net gain of 75 students, and the budget was originally for 72 students, so we're just 3 students above that. You can see that we have sort of a net gain of 403 kids, but we graduated 328, so that's how we get to the 75. All right, you saw this slide last time we were together, and the only thing that I thought was important to highlight is that when we were together last time, we were at 4,014, and we wondered, are we getting closer to that 4,024? The 4,024 is the predicted enrollment that we would have prior to the end of the 21-22 school year. And so today we have 4,018. So we are 6 students away from reaching what we projected we would be at the end of the school year. So it's close.
Yeah.
In this, you are not going to be able to read it all, but this is the information that was sent to us from the MSBA, and I myself will have to put my glasses on to read that for you. I think that the important numbers there, the total for the 2022 school year is 3,934. You might have looked at that previous slide and said, but wait, we're way beyond that. But you need to just remember that you would be adding in 80 students there for preschool. So that would take us right about to the 4,014 you saw last time. So the first arrow, the 3,934, is exactly where we were when MSBA handed this report over to us. If you look at the close of 2023, the prediction is 4,148. The only reason you see that on the right-hand side is because I blew it up large enough for you to be able to see.
Much appreciated.
Yes, I think the most alarming number that you'll see on this slide tonight is the year 2032. And although it sounds like that's far away, it's really only a decade away. And you know that if you're engaged in building construction projects, they take a very, very long time from the time that you submit an SOI to MSBA, for example, until you put a shovel in the ground, until you open the doors of that particular school. Their prediction is at the end of the 2032 school year, you could be at 5,892 students. And at some point in the future, we'll have the elementary school building committee come and do a very good presentation. How is this data derived?
Dr. Kevin, does anyone have questions on that just before you move on?
Yeah, thanks. I always struggle with this because we do the enrollment and then go right to another topic, and I always have questions. But anyway, yeah, that is. I would just add a comment that traditionally MSBA is very conservative in their forecasts.
Yes, that is true. The meeting that we had with the MSBA was illuminating. They have now hired someone who does this for them, and that is pretty much exclusively the role that he plays there. But they have gone to great pains, I think, to do better demographic studies than they once did. So in addition to sort of live birth data, they look at, how many, from the census, how many women in childbearing years are living in Hopkinton, and they divide that out into 7 sections of 5-year increments. And if you look at Hopkinton, it's 25 to 30, 30 to 35, 35 to 40. Those are sort of the childbearing years for women who are living in Hopkinton. So they do that kind of stuff, as well as cohort survival. How many kids were in the kindergarten class this year? How many of them made it to that first grade classroom, to the second grade classroom? Typically, our classes grow from K to 12. We pick up a lot of students as kids move through that K to 12 trajectory. Mm-hmm. Anyway, their data looked very good to us. A little bit scary, but also very good.
Yeah, and then that's the other question I always have, is because we always look at the numbers like, oh boy, they're getting higher. And will you be giving some commentary on what we're doing about that? I mean, you mentioned just offhand there, and maybe another preschool classroom, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that we are currently involved with the MSBA for the Elmwood project, and we had conversations with them about sort of weaving in an entire campus study to the Elmwood project, so that we wouldn't do 2 studies in isolation, one for the school committee, one for them. They would be interested because they know that whatever happens with the Elmwood school could impact this entire district, K to 12.
One question I have, because I've never been through this process before. When you get to, so the building will likely be built in 2032, correct?
The Elmwood building, absolutely.
Okay, so when you're building that building, it's going to be based on the 2032 projections? So the whole building itself will be geared towards...
They do take into account these numbers. I should really defer to, but that's sort of the plan.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to understand. So the idea is we will build to 2032. They don't project outwards from there, but how many kids there would be in the building that year?
Based on these numbers, if you built a 2-3-4 school in Hopkinton, what they have reported to us in that meeting is that we would have the single largest elementary school in the state of Massachusetts, with only 3 grades in it.
So I don't mean to draw it out too far. But I do want to just make a factual comment about Marathon School. Unless the MSBA policy has changed, they allow you to build a school to your current population at the time. They would not use projections for future. So maybe we can get clarity on that for the next meeting.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, okay. It was a good question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Meg, did you know? Dr. Hammond, do you know what Dr. Wagman's projection for 2032 was, by any chance?
No, don't.
Okay.
No, sorry.
Thank you.
I could have popped that in there, though.
No, that's okay.
All right, just a COVID-19 update. Test and stay up and running in every one of our buildings. And at this point, I know this was disappointing to some middle school parents, but we are only able to permit the unvaccinated students and unvaccinated faculty who are deemed close contact to participate. The state has always said that if you're vaccinated, you can stay in school, so it wouldn't result in sending those children home. We liked the idea of letting them participate in test and stay because it kind of doubled down on the safety. But I think when you see the numbers on the next slide, you'll understand a little bit better why it became very challenging to do that. And I guess maybe the last bullet on that page right there, the CIC really hasn't been able to provide to us that testing staff, and that has been challenging as well to our nurses. So if you take a look at this, you can see how many students and how many staff have been tested. So at this point in time, for example, at the Marathon School, there have been 107 rapid antigen tests done. They are done prior to the start of the school day, and that's in the date range from October 4th to October 20th. Each one of those tests takes 20 minutes to process. So imagine that you've got 10 kids, and they have to be at least 6 feet apart during the testing, and 1 adult, and so you can't run all of those 11 tests at the same time. You've got to sort of do them in cycles. And so it gets very challenging. It's been taking up to 90 minutes in the morning for a single school nurse with the assistance of principals, assistant principals, secretarial staff, central office folks, anyone who's available to get down there and sort of do an all-hands-on-deck approach to that. The nice thing I think that you can see is that we have had 2 cases of COVID at the high school, and only 2 students have been tested, which means that those 2 students were unvaccinated students that we tested. Anyone else who would have been vaccinated would not have been tested at the high school. right, just a really quick showing of what's going on a little bit in the district. Last week I had an opportunity to my visit to the middle school, just visit the related arts. And I know that we often talk about sort of that respite in your day, but even though these are academic disciplines, they are just such a nice space where kids are kind of unwinding a little bit. So on the right you see a general music class, on the left you see kids engaging in the engineering process. They were designing cars, and they had to go down the Hot Wheels tracks, and they had to break through a barrier. And if they didn't have enough speed, they weren't getting through the barrier. So there was a whole lot of trial going on there, and the kids were crazy engaged. It was really nice to see. Last week we had the National Honor Society induction, and so that was for regular academic National Honor Society as well as for art and music. It was a really nice event. I know that we are frequently wondering about the high school project and the marathon project. The high school project is coming to its completion, and the marathon project had its kickoff this morning. Yesterday morning? Yesterday morning. So where are we with the high school project? They did the final inspection on Tuesday of this week on the 19th. Next week they're going to be paving, and then there'll be one more inspection just to correct any of the punch list items. Likely that will be Thursday or Friday of next week, and after that we should have our certificate of occupancy. It's been a long time coming. I don't have to tell you guys who have been in that building every day.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Marathon kickoff, as I said, took place yesterday, and the project manager is Colliers and the designer is DRA, and so we reviewed really the agreed upon timeline with them yesterday. DRA is working on the schematic and the design documents concurrently. So off to a good start at Marathon. And that's all.
Any remaining questions?
I do, but if you want to take any in-person questions first, that's
I
fine.
think you're up, Nancy. Go ahead.
Okay, so my question is about test and stay, because I know that this was a shift from what we had believed at the beginning. What is required for the vaccinated kids? It sounds like in the email that went out that they need a PCR or a rapid antigen test on day 5. Is that correct?
That is
correct.
correct.
Need it at all?
Yes, that's correct. On day 5, they do have to have either a PCR or a rapid antigen test.
So in the event that they are not able to get a test for just reasons of availability or whatnot, what happens then? Are they excluded from being in school, or is there a plan B for them?
So here's what I would imagine. There are several testing sites that the nurses give to parents when the kids are vaccinated close contacts. And so some of them are just, still drive up kinds of places so that they should be able to kind of on their own schedule get there and test. In the event that a family indicated a hardship, in the event that they didn't have a car, for example, they didn't have transportation to a place like that, we'd be happy to work with a family if they presented a hardship.
Okay, thank you. That was my concern. Was just that. So thank you.
Sorry, I'm turning you, Nancy. That brings us to. Do you have questions?
Yeah, I do have one question. On the high school, you mentioned maybe if all things go well, certificate of occupancy by end of next week. Then when would the school be ready to use that space? I know we'd be allowed to use it right away, but do you see them moving into that space the next Monday?
So the classrooms are all set up, all the furniture's in them, so they're able to be used as of next Monday. I think I would really leave it up to Evan Mr. Bishop, to decide how he's going to fill those spots. I think he's already got his plan in place. I just don't know how long it will take them to kind of move from where they are to where they need to be.
Yeah.
So,
When I've been in
ready.
the furniture is beautiful. The classrooms are beautiful.
The classrooms really are beautiful.
Yeah.
They came
That's
out
so
nice.
exciting.
Good, thanks.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? All right, that brings us to the school committee chair report. That's you, Nancy.
Okay, so payroll warrant S22008 has been approved. It's in your packet. And then I also, just before we go into the listening tour report, just did want to report out a little bit on communication, because we did receive quite a bit of communication since our last meeting. We received a fair number of emails, both for and against lifting the mask requirement for vaccinated individuals in the high school, as well as we received a number of requests from the media for information regarding that. As last Tuesday, it was made public that Hopkinton had received the waiver. At the time, as you all know, we were the only one who had received it, so that it did get quite a bit of attention. The other thing is we received results of 2 different petitions. There was a petition that went out asking us to reconsider the mask mandates for students according to the state's allowance to remove mandate for vaccinated students and staff at the high school. The latest count I saw on that was 103 signatures on that. Then we also received another petition from parents who wished that we would keep the masks in place. That had 208 signatures representing 180 Hopkinton households. So there was that. Then Carol, are you able to put up the PowerPoint I sent you?
I should be in about 10 seconds, I think.
And while you're looking at that, I'll just explain. This is just a brief kind of 30,000-foot view of the listening tour series that we did this summer in the month of August. And just wanted to kind of give a little bit of that. I had wanted to include more detail than what wound up being practical as I was putting it together. But I think it's a good point for us as we're discussing later on tonight, school committee potentially setting some goals if we want to keep some of this in mind. And also budget season is upon us. So I think that a lot of this is relevant just for us to keep in mind. And I think nice for people in the public to hear where that went. So is it, I do see it there.
It's there.
Okay. So if you could just shift that from my cover to the next slide, which shows the goal of it was to provide targeted office hours to facilitate opportunities for the school community to hear directly from specific sectors in the school community, just to get some of the lived experiences about the challenges and successes and concerns relative to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would say we had a great response. We did hear, it wasn't an overwhelming number of people at each one, but we had a consistent attendance. And we also heard from a lot of people who just appreciated that there was the opportunity in the interest the school committee had in hearing from people directly. So I think we reached both some people that we hear from by email and in other ways, but also a number of people that I had not had the opportunity to meet. And then, as you know, we wanted to use the information to help improve student and family experiences as we're working on policy and budget in the year ahead. So I am flipping back and forth. Do you want to go to the next slide, please?
Yeah.
So this is just the list of groups that we invited in. We certainly, the list is not as comprehensive as it could be. There are definitely, we had discussed doing a second round and inviting other groups as well to hear from them, but this was the first pass at the groups that we wanted to make sure that we targeted in the beginning. And can everybody see, because I can't see how good the print is. Is that visible to everybody?
Yes, it's visible, yeah.
Okay, all right, so I'm not gonna read the whole thing then.
No.
So then, some of my outward impressions, and I think that everybody I would invite to kind of share their own. Like I had indicated, attendance was consistent for the sessions. People appreciated the invitation to be heard. Lots of ideas from people. Some of them were things that are related to specific to our domain. Some of them were things that are more operational that we wanted to pass along to different groups as appropriate, and we did. So then if we go into the next one, this is just some of the overall themes. I know we have more specific notes for each one that we had, but communication was a big thing that I heard that people wanted. They either didn't understand what it is that we did. I remember at one of the groups, we had a new family who came in that grabbed at the opportunity to meet with us, not really knowing what it was about, but wanting the opportunity to have some face-to-face time. Overlapping needs, were a theme where people who might have financial aid but also might have needs related to translation services or some of the other groups that we were talking about overlapping in multiple ways. The other, we talked a little bit about limiting factors to accessing things that happen outside of the school day, things like after school activities, extra help or evening programs, and some of the things that make it difficult for families to participate. I don't have to read all of it, but just wanted people to be able to take a look at some of the things that I felt like had come from a number of different ways. And I think, some of these things were addressed outside of what we were discussing over the summer, but one of the things was the social worker that was coming, that was brought in part by grant funding and in part by combining a position that was already being hired for at the high school. And that was relative to when we were talking with groups regarding socioeconomic difficulties and single parenting, and having a person who's able to identify and resources for people and help people get connected to what they need. So then I put down what I think of as sort of our next steps. Certainly there might be others. Budget discussions, which are coming up, as I said, very soon. Are there policies that we want, there's a typo in there. Are there policies we want to look at where these discussions were highlighted? I think that would be something certainly we could bring up here or forward to our wonderful policy working group. And then school committee goal setting. We had looked at a policy related to that on a first reading several weeks ago, but we do have a reading on that again tonight. And then do we want to hold a second listening series? And if so, when would be a good time to do that? And then finally, just want to thank all of our participants from the listening series, and to those who reached out with thoughts about it. It's, their willingness to engage authentically with us was meaningful, and I know a lot of people had said really was a highlight of the summer. Do other people, I think, Meg, you may have been the one person who was at every single session. I don't know that anybody else was at all of them, but other themes that people can recall from the summer that you feel like would be important to bring forward tonight, or other ways that you want to see us move forward with this work? Or just also if you want to percolate on it and come back to it later, that's fine too.
I think what you've done here in collecting the information is great, but I think what I heard over and over again is a longing for a sense of community and different venues for these groups to gather in and speak and to collect allies, which has been very difficult during COVID.
Yep.
So I hope going forward we'll be able to reach out to these groups in a way that doesn't necessarily involve Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that
I would agree with
human contact is very much longed for.
I would agree.
Are there other comments, questions? Leah? Joe?
Did you have anything? Okay. Yeah, I thought it was really neat that we did those. I think it helps because the five of us sitting around trying to make a policy to acknowledge a certain minority group, whether it's high performers or IEP or racial minority, we can kind of hypothetically talk about it, but there's nothing like asking the group itself, the people in that group themselves, what they think is needed. And I think it was productive that way. I guess the one thing I heard in the multiple meetings I was in was the common theme, regardless of which group we were talking to, was people just want to be understood. They want to be recognized for who they are and to be understood. And we have a big school district, and they want some assurance. Often the teachers are the frontline contact for most families. So they want to feel that their teachers understand the situation that their child is in as a student.
Yeah.
Well said, both of you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know that I have any additional comments about what was said, but I do know that I really, really appreciate the fact that these parents in all of these situations were willing to make themselves vulnerable and come to these meetings and talk to us about such difficult things. I appreciate the trust that they gave us, and I really, really hope we live up to it. So that's all.
And
I agree with all of that.
Sorry, Nancy.
Go ahead.
I would just echo, what has been so eloquently stated. In terms of what we do, I found the listening tour to be an excellent endeavor on our part. I would definitely like to see us continue. I think targeted office hours of a sort. I think we could probably mix in continued office hours along, maybe identity lines, but also targeted on other topics as well. But I would like to see us bring office hours back. Not that we retired them, but we've been busy, and I would like to see those come back, because I really do love to talk directly to the community face to face, even if it's on Zoom. The other thing I'd say as well is I did take a bunch of notes, as I know many people did, so I think you captured the essence of what was discussed very well. But as we look at potentially setting school committee goals, and as we look through the budget, I will be referencing back to the notes that I took and the discussions that we had to see opportunities for us to reflect some needs that were articulated in the work that we do at the school committee level, because we're not operational, but there are things that we do at the policy and budget level that, and there were some things that I made a note of, like, oh, when we talk about this policy, we could do this. So I think maybe we keep that in mind going forward.
I agree. The other thing that I had meant to highlight in was multiple groups talking about the importance of feeling represented in both the types of materials, books and whatnot that we're using in the classroom, as well as reflected in the staffing that we have. And I know that has come up in other ways, other discussions in the district as well. And I know that we have so many goals around addressing some of these things, but I think it is meaningful to hear that from people wanting to make sure they feel represented. So, anyway.
Do you guys have any questions on?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
So the other thing I thought would be helpful, particularly because we have our new student representatives on the school committee, would be a discussion of the school committee norms, or just a little kind of brief overview. I know we've already passed them, but I don't, Carol, are you able to put those up on the screen?
I think Amanda's going to email them to me, so I will do that in just a moment. I'm going to turn the AirPlay off for just a moment.
They're in that drive.
Nancy emailed them.
She did. Nancy emailed them today, so let me just forward this to
They're in the drive that George had sent too.
And I apologize, I did not have Jesse and Ryan's email addresses, or I certainly would have included you in the email of that as well. And that might be helpful if you guys wanted to be on the distribution when we're sending things out that would be discussed at the meeting. Is that something that would be helpful for you guys to have?
Or is that too many emails?
No, that would definitely be helpful. Thank you.
And I think while they're working on putting that up, one thing I think that's important to me in terms of talking about you guys being at the table with us is making sure that everybody feels like they can speak up and offer opinions and be part of the conversation equally. That's, it's exciting for us to have you here and wanting to make sure that you feel like you're included in the ability to discuss whatever it is that's being discussed. You don't have to wait for somebody to ask you specifically.
There we go. The norms are up, Nancy.
Okay. So you want to scroll? I cannot see exactly where it is on the thing, but
first page, the beginning.
Yep. Okay, so let me. Sorry, I'm now having technology issues on my end.
Do you want me to just cover the topics in the
Yeah.
norms?
Can you go ahead, because I'm having trouble pulling it up on my end.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
The broad view, yeah.
so the norms basically are just statements of what we do and how we interact with each other to run the committee in an effective way. So we'll send you a copy and you can definitely review them. But you can see the first section is how we govern, and there are a bunch of statements that reflect how we govern the district. And then how we communicate is the next step. It's important, one of the big things about communication, everyone at this table needs to be able to be heard, and so we try to be respectful of each other, as you would in any class norms. I'm sure you do this all the time in school, right? And then how we improve, and you can read through these on your own. Yep, and that's it. So these were adopted this year. It was a new way of us looking at our norms. In the past, we had really taken them up from scratch, and it was a shorter list. And these were drafted by Massachusetts Association of School Committees as a template, more or less, and we made a few changes. But essentially, we adopted their norms. So we'll send them. And did any committee member want to highlight any particular aspect of our norms? Or Nancy, did anyone want to highlight anything other than those three areas for tonight?
I don't, and I can't say I don't want to cut anybody off if somebody looks like they're about to speak. But I don't know that I wanted to highlight a specific one so much as to really for us all to keep them in mind and to have them. It would be nice. I don't know. Are they available on the website at all? Is that something under our school committee tab that we think would be important to be able to easily access? Just
We can put
given
them
that
there.
when we discussed that we were going to discuss it, they weren't easily accessible for us, that we had to send them around.
True.
We can ask Georgette if she can help us get them
Yeah.
up there.
So,
I remember liking them in concept, but following will take some nudging maybe. So they're very good. I mean, it gets down to civil discussion. So I like it still.
I do have a question.
Okay, yes.
So are you guys gonna send us emails regularly, when the school committee is before the school committee meets? Are you gonna send us regular emails? Because this time we didn't get an email. Is that just?
I think we could add you to the notification that the packet is posted.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
It gets
absolutely.
posted by Tuesday at 2 or 3 for the meeting on Thursday, and it's posted. You can access it through the town meeting calendar. But if you have trouble with that, we can make sure that you get notified that it's been posted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think even just for us to be aware, if one of us is going to have some kind of a discussion on something where we have an emailed copy to send somebody, if somebody's going to get it, you guys would get included in it as well. So we don't always we don't often have a lot of things that we send out like that by email. Most of it's available in the public packet. But in terms of the school committee norms, I did email those around to the rest of the committee, and I had thought, I wished I had your emails just because I would have included you on them, so you would have the benefit of looking at them ahead of time. Just if you had any questions or anything you wanted to add, you'd have time to think about it.
The biggest thing for you to know is because of open meeting law, we can't chat through email or any other means about topics that are under our governance. So if someone is sending something out as preview material for a meeting, you'll see not for deliberation at the top. We can receive it. We can't talk to anybody about it because that would violate open meeting law. So,
However, if you do have a question, you can always email the superintendent.
Yes, Dr.
She
Katz.
may be able to get you an answer.
exactly.
Thank you for remembering that.
Yeah.
So if you're worried you were missing something juicy, you weren't. You really weren't.
Okay.
And I think that actually is a point that not everybody recognizes in the community either, is that that we don't have the ability to discuss things like, I think people want to know, well, what does the school committee think about masking, for example? Well, if we haven't discussed it in public, not one of us can say what the school committee thinks about it, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right.
Okay, y'all.
Thank you.
Just want to mention the norms.
Yes,
before
please.
we
I thank you for bringing this up, because I do think it's important to remember that we sometimes discuss topics which make us feel very heated. But even amidst that heat, we have to remember to give equal airspace to everybody. And try to be sensitive that other people have points of views that they might not interject as forcefully as others. So it really is, as you said, classroom etiquette. Just acknowledging that not one of us is more important than any other person in the room.
Well said.
Are you all set with the chair report, Nancy?
I am all set with the chair report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so liaison reports. Does anyone have a liaison report today? Joe?
You know, last night I was at the Sustainable Green Committee. I'm the liaison for school committee for that, and there was a very relevant discussion there for schools, and so I have documented a few of the questions they had, and I followed up with the superintendent to send those questions to her. But there are things like the committee they're working on a net zero plan for Hopkinton. It's a long-term effort, but they would like the school to participate in that, so they would like to explore, would there be interest in a contact they could work with. For example, they're working with the town engineer and planning director on the town side, and they wanted to know if there would be a point of engagement here. We don't need to answer that here, but we should follow up maybe for the next meeting that I go to. They wanted to know about things like how much is styrofoam used in the cafeterias, in which schools? Have we looked at alternatives to that? Do we have processes in schools for automatically turning off everything except the necessary emergency safety lights at night? Because not all of our town buildings apparently do that. So they wanted to know about that. They wanted to know, have we considered composting cafeteria waste? So there's lots of ideas. The school is a big operation, as we know. And whatever we do in the schools to along the path of sustainability makes a big impact for the town as well. And I know we're going to have an update on capital planning tonight that's going to include some data on energy usage and energy production by the town, solar panels in the schools. So that's very relevant too. So those are the types of things. But it's very exciting because it becomes very relevant for the town if the school is engaged as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
I made a note for maybe a future agenda item, just to circle back and actually have, if we need to vote on or find out how we go about getting a representative, or.
Yeah. For now, I just sent those specific questions to the staff, to the administration, and they'll come back with responses. I'll share those with the committee, and I guess we could take it from there.
Great. Any other liaison reports?
So I do have a quick one. So am I okay to go?
You go.
The budget advisory group met on the 14th for the first time, and we are going to meet every other week, which I think is great to try to keep on the same page or get on the same page with our town partners. It is exciting to me just that we're discussing, having the discussion and this early, so that when we get to the point of voting, we will have a good sense on each side of where things will be. There are some concerns that I expressed just in terms of the 3.25% number in some of the squeeze that we may feel with that with regard to some of the expenses we have coming forward, but more to come on all of that.
Great, thank you. Meg?
Just briefly, there was a CPAC meet and greet with the Director of Student Services 2 nights ago, and there were 11 people in attendance, which is great, but we need more people. So just a pitch for CPAC, if you have children who learn in any way differently from the neurotypical child, join the force. It's a great group of parents who have very good, enriching conversations about special needs and individual education plans.
Great. Thank you. All right, that brings us to new business. We have Upper Charles Trail Committee, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay. Through the chair, I'm wondering if you would be willing to let me express some concerns before you enter into deliberation.
Mm-hmm.
Please.
Sure. So I feel like with the Upper Charles Trail Commission, we have always been, very good allies to them, and we've, I think, sort of shared space, and I truly value the presence of the trails through Hopkinton. This particular stretch of the trails, I am a little bit concerned about. My belief is that the way it works is it goes down to EMC Park and then goes along the perimeter of the Marathon School and then may cut across that property to come back out to Hayden Row Street. And I am just a little bit worried that we would have people walking behind the Marathon School where we are educating some of our youngest learners. My second concern with it is that I'm not exactly sure where it goes through that other piece of property, but I wouldn't want to be in a position where we were competing with the trails should that become a location for a new Elmwood school. You know, we'll be looking at parcels all over the community, but that could in fact be one of the parcels up for consideration, I think. And then the last thing, and I'm not 100% sure that this is true, but I do believe that the Trails Commission can apply for their grant without the school committee's endorsement, but that would be something that I think we would need to check on.
Okay, does the committee have any questions? Does everyone remember what we're talking about? Okay.
I do have a question, if that's okay. Because I read the email too from a member of the public about this concern, and I don't quite understand why we're stopping it at this point when they were only asking for support to apply for a grant to do a study. Is that kind of subconsciously giving them a sense of agreement that we want them to proceed along that route?
I think it does. I think if it says that they have our endorsement and someone comes out and does a study and then they say, sure, it's absolutely feasible to put a trail on here and grant money is used to do that study. If at that point we say, oh gosh, I'm not sure I want a trail behind the Marathon School, it almost feels like we've undone what we've permitted them to do.
Okay.
I don't want to be disingenuous with that.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yeah, last week I was just cautious because I hadn't heard from our Director of Buildings and Grounds, and I don't know if you just represented the advice he gave you, or should we?
We have had conversations about it.
Yeah, so thank you. I'm okay now then.
Nancy, did you have any questions or comments?
Not beyond what's already been said.
Okay.
Thank you.
So does anyone want to make a motion? Here, there was a motion written in the agenda there, well, consideration requesting approval. Are we looking to approve this, or do you want to let this go?
I guess I have a question about that in terms of, and I don't know, I'm not intimately enough familiar with these parcels of land. I do have the map that was sent out to us, but is there a way to ask them to look to not go in that specific area and bring it back? Or is this, if we do not vote to endorse this, are we dooming it to never happen? Does that make sense? Because I am in favor of the project as a whole, but I do share some of the concerns that have been brought up.
Yes, sorry, Nancy, I do have to clarify, our agenda does not have a motion or a motion TBD on it. It says for consideration only, so we're actually not voting tonight.
Okay.
So, I don't know, I mean, maybe if we have more questions, maybe we can forward them to them before a vote request going forward.
My recollection was that they are looking to get ahead, but they don't, the application is not actually due until February. That was what
that's what she said, yeah.
Mrs. Moran had said at the last meeting.
Okay, so a couple of the questions that I think I've heard you ask are, will it undermine the entire project so that it would halt it entirely? And then the second one is, can they go ahead with an application even without the school committee's endorsement?
Yeah, that's my question actually. Is our vote required, or is it nice to have? Yeah.
Yeah, are there alternative paths they're considering? Would be nice to know too.
Okay, that's another one.
Yeah.
And is it actually town land or school land?
I can't remember how it ended up at
I can't
town
remember
meeting.
either. It was in the border in the wetland, I think, mostly, or on the border property.
Yeah, I do think that if they come across the other piece of property, I think that is that town-owned land, the Irvine Todaro property.
The
Tim
town
says
bought
yes.
Irvine and Todaro, yeah.
Yeah.
I just can't remember
So
if
it
they
would
then
be across
reserved
town.
it for school or it's just town owned.
Okay. Thank you. So you'll take those.
Yes, we can look at the answers to those.
All right, that brings us to the item on face coverings. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay. So as we all know, there has been an awful lot of consternation about lifting the mask mandate, specifically at Hopkinton High School. And I'd like to start by indicating that when we say lifting the mask mandate, that's very different from unmasking. Lifting the mask mandate gives people the choice as to whether or not they would like to wear a mask to school. So people are probably also wondering, why was it that we decided to apply for off-ramping as early as we did? And I think that when we look at the data in Hopkinton, 82% of the entire community is fully vaccinated. And in that percentage are the children who are between 0 and 11 years of age. So you really do have a great big segment of your population unrepresented, in that 82%. So if you think then about the vaccination rate overall in Hopkinton, it's very high. And we do know that more than 95% of the kids who are between ages 12 and 19 are fully vaccinated in Hopkinton. So when we applied for the waiver, we applied for it so that it gave us the latitude to really make a local decision. At the time that we applied, we weren't applying so that the decision was fully made. And so as superintendent of schools on October 1st, I did apply for the waiver, and our waiver was granted by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education on October 7th. And that was really only hours before the last meeting that we had 2 weeks ago. I will review with people the vaccination rates in the community just because I think it's so important to this conversation tonight. If you take a look at the 12 to 15 years of age and the 16 to 19 years of age, you'll see that both of those exceed the 95% marker. When our town public health official, Sean McAuliffe, was here, he indicated to us a couple of weeks ago that it's probably closer to 98%. And people may also wonder, why is that population number in some places actually smaller than the number of fully vaccinated people? How can that happen? And so just so you know, there are people who do not fill out the census. And so if you look at the census report data, in the ages of between 16 and 19, the census report tells us that 987 people that fit that age span live in Hopkinton. But in reality, we have 1,040 people vaccinated. So there are more people vaccinated because they have to report their vaccination. They don't necessarily report themselves on the census list. That's good news, actually. Those numbers are good. What you're seeing here, and it might be very, very difficult for you to take a look at that, these are age ranges, and the public health official has shared with me the number of cases we've had in each one of those age ranges. So children age 0 to 4, there have been 18 cases, and this spans from August 7th to October 23rd. In 5 to 11, we've had 34 cases, 12 to 15, 6 cases, 16 to 19, 3 cases. So what you're kind of like maybe starting to see there is, sort of the efficacy of that vaccine as kids start to get vaccinated. So 12 to 15 and 16 to 19 are folks who could have been vaccinated and who are perhaps in some ways exercising some care, we hope. If we take a look at Hopkinton High School, and you'll see this on the next slide, we've only had 2 cases, and they were breakthrough cases this year. So in the 16 to 19 range, the August 7th and August 14th, they wouldn't count in there because school wasn't in session then. So the only number that counts in there is September 4th. Mm-hmm. Likewise, in the 12 to 15, you'll see that there were 6 kids who have tested positive. Only 1 of them was at the high school. So the rest you can infer were middle school cases. Here is just our weekly dashboard. This takes you from October 15th to October 21st. You can see that we've had 3 cases in this date range. We have a total of 19 cumulative cases. And in this date range, we had 1 positive case at Marathon, 1 at the middle school, and 1 at the Hopkins school. Again, you'll see that the high school is really sort of not turning up cases right now, and we still have only 2 cumulative cases there. All right, so in an effort really to present this information to you tonight very fairly, I want to present some of the pros and some of the cons. And we all know that we've heard so many different things out there. And, as the students indicated tonight, almost 70% of the students are looking to lift the masking mandate. 30% of them would prefer not to do that. We have petitions from people in the community who say I would prefer to lift the masking mandate. We have people who say please don't lift the mask mandate. So in an effort to really present fairly, I wanted to share with you some of the what do we knows. So the first one is we absolutely know that the coronavirus and its mutations are not going away. Eventually it will just sort of become part of our lives, like the flu, like the common cold. We will also have a coronavirus. Given what we have seen with vaccination rates, it is highly unlikely that we are going to ever see better vaccination rates than the ones that we do right now. The vaccination rates are super high in our high school. However, some of our kids, ages 5 to 11, are not yet vaccinated, and I know this is a concern for some folks. We do believe that vaccination for children ages 5 to 11 should be available in November. So in the coming month, we should start to see children in that age group getting vaccinated. And while boosters are available for some folks right now, if you are a Pfizer person, you can get a Pfizer vaccine booster. You'll start to see that those are going to become pretty mainstream available as well. All right, however, in conversations today with Sean McAuliffe, and I want to be very fair in representing his opinion, he has suggested that he would prefer to postpone off-ramping, at least at this time. He gave me a couple of statistics that he would have liked to make public tonight. The percent of positivity in Hopkinton is up right now from 1.34 to 2.21, and the 2-week case count also went up from 31 to 46, so that's a concern of his. A concern that I know I have expressed in the past is that there's going to be great difficulty in monitoring the students who are vaccinated and the students who are unvaccinated. So vaccine status cannot be shared with faculty because it's part of a student's medical record. So even though our school nurses can know who's vaccinated and who's unvaccinated, faculty cannot. So there would be a concern that unvaccinated students would be taking off their masks and no one would know that they were unvaccinated. In speaking to the nurses, I asked them for an estimate of how long would it take them to go through all of the state databases to retrieve the information for the, what did you guys tell me, 1,216 students?
Yes.
Yes.
And their estimate was that could be 40 hours of work to get the last of that information kind of pulled from the state databases. But what they also have said is, if parents were able to submit proof of vaccination, so if we sent out, an email, you could click on it and then just upload a picture of your child's vaccination status, and we could fill a form, it would certainly take away a lot of those 40 hours. So that would move things along much more quickly with parental help with that process. And again, I stole some of your data. Approximately 70% of the students are preferring to lifting the mask mandate, and 30% of the students prefer masking. And so I know this body has asked me for my recommendation, and I think you know that throughout the pandemic we've been bold at times, but there have also been times that we've been fairly cautious. And I think what we've always tried to do is to allow data to drive our decisions. And the truth of the matter is that right now, even though we have all of this data, we don't actually have data on what would it look like in a school if you had 98% of your students fully vaccinated and you unmasked. We don't have that data. No one in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I believe, has that data right now. And so in an effort to sort of take a very sort of balanced and cautious approach, this would be my recommendation. And I know that tonight you will do whatever it is that the 5 of you seem to think is the most prudent course of action. So what you see on that screen, I think that we need to proceed with great caution. And I think that happens by gathering data. And so that kind of data for me is how have we seen increases in breakthrough cases once we allowed students to lift the mask mandate and to unmask? Are we seeing greater absenteeism because of COVID-19 like symptoms? So if we are unmasked and Jen simply has the common cold, I could catch that from her, but it puts both of us out of school because we have COVID symptoms. So we don't necessarily have COVID, but there could be more transmission of things that look like COVID. Strep throat, those kinds of things would be keeping kids out, but it would also be far easier to spread. My belief is that we should establish a trial period. And I know that there are people who would say, let's do the trial period in January. And I think, well, we could be in the heart of flu season in January. We could be having a spike in cases because people traveled over the winter holidays. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not necessarily sure that I think that there's an ideal time. But I do like the time period, if we're thinking about doing it right now, between November 1st and November 19th. That gives us 3 weeks of sort of full lifting of the mask mandate to say what happened. Did it work? Were there breakthrough cases? Was absenteeism increased? What data can we sort of mine from those 3 weeks? I would ask students to return to universal masking actually on Monday, November 22nd, which is the Monday before Thanksgiving. And I hesitated about that. I wondered, should we go with before Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving? And part of me thinks that it's just kind of easier if in those 2 days we kind of come back. We say, let's get back to the masking so that it's sort of part of your just regular routines and behavior. I sometimes think that if you go on a great big vacation like that for 5 days over Thanksgiving, and then you come back, everybody's, sometimes you're almost school groggy, right? Because you haven't been there in so long that you have to reacclimate yourselves. But I think it's nice to say we're back in action before we have to do that on a Monday morning with everybody coming back in the building and we're handing out masks and chasing people down who forgot them and all of that. And then the last thing that I would recommend is that I think it's important that the committee vote in language to reinstate mandated masking at any time in case there is a sharp rise in cases. And so I would work very carefully with Sean McAuliffe to take a look at that. If we take off masks and suddenly 2 weeks in, we realize that number that used to say 2 now says 22, it might be time to say this was a failed experiment and we put them back on.
That's the end of your...
And that is all I have. Yes, and now I imagine that you certainly pose questions or we can deliberate about it.
Okay, so I just want to say, I think process-wise, I think we can ask our, our clarifying questions, and then maybe we'll go one by one and share our thoughts on this. But let me start with the student council reps who are here. Do you have questions for Dr. Kavanaugh or any of one of the committee?
I have a question. So you're saying that basically that if we want to lift the mask mandate, we should start on directly November 1st, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And that is a trial period from November 1st to November 19th.
That is correct.
So in that trial period, you're going to be analyzing like how many COVID cases are being sparked from this trial experiment, correct?
That is correct.
My question is that how many cases would be enough to re-implement the masks?
That is a really good question because I think sometimes numbers alone don't tell the story. One of the things, if you go back to some of the Hopkins data that you saw there, and you could see that there were enormous numbers of kids who had participated in Test and Stay. There was an isolated event that happened outside of school that caused a number of Hopkins kids to become COVID positive. If it were a situation like that where something happened on a Saturday, say for example, and there were 50 high school kids at a party, unmasked, and the COVID came about because of that, I wouldn't look at that as an in-school problem. So I guess maybe to answer your question, it would be, certainly we'd be looking at data, but I think we would also have to look at the circumstances surrounding that data.
Oh, I just had to say something else. So are we also going to be looking at the data from like Hopkins, Elmwood, and like if those cases rise up but the high school cases stay the same, are you still going to implement the mask back on the high school?
We could certainly do that, and that's also a very good question. What maybe folks don't know is that, let's imagine that there's, a small outbreak at the high school, that 8 or 10 kids become COVID positive, and then suddenly we see that 8 or 10 of those kids have middle school or Hopkins or Elmwood or whatever age siblings, and they start to test positive, and this starts to impact our elementary and middle school. Absolutely, it would make great sense to do that. And we find out that data through contact tracing. So when, say for example, your nurse, Mrs. Patterson, will say, we have a high school student who's COVID positive, she would also say to us, there's a middle school and an Elmwood school sibling in that family, and we would know.
I just have a question. So you mentioned, I think one of the big sources of concern for students has been the vaccination proof and how we would go through that and do that. So given the November 1st for the trial, with those 40 hours of going through all of the state data, would that be a feasible option? Or if we're looking at the trial, would we have to do the parent reporting option or self-reporting?
I think we would look first for the parents to self-report. That takes an awful burden off of our nurses. And I know you heard tonight that they are spending 90 minutes on test and stay. They're spending a good hour calling families at home.
But I think the parts that give me pause are the fact that I think Dr. Kavanaugh, this didn't give me pause, but Dr. Kavanaugh sent out a blog or a memo this week sort of relating the marathon to the pandemic, and I really appreciated that, and I feel like we've come down off of Heartbreak Hill and we think we're done, but we still have that last little bit. I sort of felt that way, and I feel like part of me wants to go ahead with this trial, and I think there are lots of good reasons to do it, and part of me really wants to go ahead with this trial starting like on Martin Luther King Day. So we know that the younger children will be able to get a vaccine probably in a couple weeks. And I worry about the efficacy of the Pfizer vaccine for kids who were vaccinated, say, in April, and we're 6 or 7 months from there. And we know I think we know from studies that the efficacy does wane at about 4 months or so. So they will also be able to get boosters. I think we were just given the opportunity, or actually hasn't been the final vote hasn't been taken yet, to allow mixed match boosters. So the teachers who got a Moderna vaccine or a Johnson J&J vaccine can now get a booster, hopefully, if it's finalized as well. So for me, the 3-week window is very attractive because it's, for all the reasons you said, Lee, and all the reasons you said, Dr. Kavanaugh, and yet I think if we take that 3-week window and we do it after the dust settles from post-holiday travel, we've finished that last leg of the marathon, and we haven't, we'll get our data then. I think that for me that's kind of where I am, because I feel like we've done the work, but we do see cases in the lower grades where they can't be vaccinated, and we are going to have that opportunity in a very short amount of time. Yeah. So, I do understand that the health director has the same kind of concerns, and I think those are valid.
As someone who's run marathons, can I comment?
I've never run a marathon.
We're past, we've passed the final stretch. So we're at 98% vaccination rate, right? I've got my oldest child's in college. She was probably not 100% compliant when she was in high school. My youngest was in 3rd grade at the time, now 4th grade. We go to grocery stores, restaurants together, and masks are not required. In some towns, when we go out, masks are required, and we put our mask on. And then we go to another town, and masks aren't, so we take them off. In fact, in this room, masks are not required. That's why I'm not wearing one here today, because our local health policy in this building is to not wear one. I think that our high school students, as our high school students here even pointed out to us, are interacting extensively without masks, whether at lunch or in athletic activities. If you're watching the World Series, there's these stadiums filled with people at close range, in the indoor concession areas as well, without masks. And I think we're at a point here in Hopkinton where in those situations, probably a lower vaccination rate. Here, 98%. And we're already in some pockets having those kind of trials, whether you look at lunch as a trial or sports or other activities, or the fact that people already have varying age children and they're getting by. Our youngest wears a mask sometimes when others aren't. So I think families will do what they need to. But given where we are, we're not going to be at a better time than now to at least do a 3-week. I would be advocating for more, but I sense the consensus of the board is different. I would be advocating for just lift it and leave it like that. But I would at least hope we could come to some compromise, and it's the superintendent's recommendation if we do something to make it 3-week. I'd be willing as a compromise to take that.
Nancy, I don't want to not include your.
So I did have a couple of comments. So I would agree with, I think, most people in saying that the masks are not ideal for anybody. I agree with the need for things to be data driven. I do have a couple of concerns about this right now. One is, while we have a great vaccination rate at the high school, and many people are choosing to go places such as sporting events and restaurants and other places where they are unmasked, there are a number of people in our community who are not able to get vaccinated, either because of particular things to do with their health or their beliefs and whatnot in the high school, but also the younger siblings, the staff we have that have younger kids. And it's while going to a big sports arena is a choice that people can make, and going to a restaurant without a mask is a choice you can make. Going to school is not a choice that you make. You have to go to school if you're not homeschooled or otherwise in school someplace. I have concerns about, the fact that we're looking to take away one of our layers of mitigation that have kept us safe, and I'm not sure what it is that we're putting in place that's going to protect some of the people that can't be protected. So, for example, and I am not in favor of mandatory vaccinations, but I know that is something that some districts are looking at. Other districts are looking at doing pooled testing, or they're already doing pooled testing, which we don't do for a lot of reasons. Test and stay is a great thing that has allowed kids to remain in school while they are waiting to see if being a close contact has actually caused them to contract it. But we're also hearing that we're not able to do test and stay on vaccinated kids. So I don't think that really, that leaves a percentage of people who are not necessarily getting those tests or have barriers to it. So I have concerns about the timing as well, in terms of the positivity rate going up over 2%, which it has not been recently, and just the ripple impact. So if people choose to wear a mask, they protect other people better than they protect themselves. So that anybody who's vulnerable at the high school, or who lives with somebody who's vulnerable, by virtue of being in the high school with no masks, they don't have that option to protect the people in the same way. Eventually we have to rip the Band-Aid off. Yeah. We have to kind of move forward. I'm just not hearing right now that this is the logical first step. And
may I, somebody else want to talk?
Are you done, Nancy?
Yeah, well, I am done. The other thing I know that we had discussed, that somebody had brought up at our last meeting, was potentially starting with unmasking our teachers and having them at 6 feet and kind of taking a slower approach.
So, I feel exactly what you're saying. And in my head, that would be my ideal, would be like after winter break, when the kids are vaccinated. I think the reason I keep being pulled towards a trial is because, and you know, it might be completely illogical, right? Is I feel like people have worked so hard to get vaccinated, and the herd immunity is there, and even with like measles vaccines and things like that, people are at risk if there's no herd immunity, right? And so the herd immunity is what protects even the people who are at risk. And then in my head, what I did was, okay, there's 3 weeks for this trial, right? And then we stop it. And this is happening while the lower grades are starting to get vaccinated, right? So if we say, I think you mentioned the vaccine workshop. So if we say a possible vaccine workshop on the 11th of November, and the children are getting a Pfizer, right, let's say. Then 3 weeks later, they get a second vaccine, and then 2 weeks after that, they're fully vaccinated. So if we bring in the trial, take it away, and leave it gone for the holidays, then when they come back, we'll have a percentage rate, I won't say how high it is, for the lower grades, which will give us more coverage. And if the data is great even without that, then having more coverage is even better, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel so torn in two. All
Yeah.
week I just felt absolutely dissected.
Yes.
I mean, I have a child who does not do well with a mask. His learning has suffered incredibly because he cannot see people's faces and he cannot read social cues. But I've tried to kind of extricate that concern from my larger thinking about the community and health. But none of us is a health professional.
Right.
I hear lots of advice from health professionals and doctors like, oh, keep the mask on forever, you know, flu season is coming and da-da-da. And I understand that caution, and I want to be cautious too. I don't want anyone to get sick at all. But at the same time, I mean, the intricacy with which we are facing this again, and I do have to say, Dr. Kavanaugh has made a sensible recommendation. In my 4 years of knowing her, she's never behaved rashly. And I have given her many chances to behave impulsively and to be obstreperous, and she's never risen to one. And so I trust her judgment. She cares a lot about this district. If she says, it's time for a trial, dudes, I'm ready. Let's do the trial.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
I have a comment. Oh, sorry.
Through you, should we, through the chair, or, I mean, do you want to make a comment?
Oh, just
sure.
on.
Yeah, sure.
Just following up on that. I think it's really good that we're doing a trial date now, as early as possible, especially in that time period, because I feel like that time period is one of the best time periods we could possibly get regarding, like, accepting, like, maybe spring, but that's very late. Like, that's too far in, and by that time, maybe newer data will be presented. But I think the trial date now is really good because I think it's better to do it earlier than later.
Before the flu season, for example?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remind myself too that we're not in this alone. The state, with advice from their top medical experts, waived the mask requirement for vaccinated individuals in Hopkinton High School. They did, right? So we don't have to wrestle this so much on our own locally because they're taking the leadership on that. But when we're ready, I'd be ready to make a motion that we adopt the superintendent's recommendation.
I think we're not quite. I don't know, Nate, did you want to say something?
I was going to say, I don't know that I'm quite ready to move with a motion.
Okay.
In terms of exhausting the.
No.
Yep.
I will say, can I say
Please.
something? I don't know if somebody else
Go
is. I
ahead,
don't want to cut
Nancy.
anybody off. But I would agree. I do not want to see people masked for the flu and colds and things like that. That would not be criteria that I would have regarding this. I do, you know, I do also think about the kids that would not, under this off-ramping, be able to unmask, and want to make sure, you know, that we've thought about how we can create a culture so that nobody feels like they are being asked intrusive questions or being asked, why are you wearing a mask? Where we have, I think it was it 500 kids at the high school that said they did not want to unmask at the high school. I think, you know, I wonder what that would look like if they knew that their peers were going to be unmasking. How many of those kids would unmask because they felt the peer pressure? And I'm asking that not looking for an answer, but just as a hypothetical. Whereas kids who don't have the vaccine for whatever reason are left standing out. And I guess in an ideal world, we would be able to say we have quote unquote herd immunity and people can unmask regardless of their vaccination status. But we're not there in my mind, just in terms of the lower grades aren't vaccinated at all.
I think if I just make a comment there. Oh, first of all, did you want to correct the number?
Yeah, I want to correct the data.
The number of
it's
students.
500 people who did not respond to the survey. It's not 500 people who did not vote against the policy. It's 500 people who did not respond.
What was the
What
number?
was the number
200.
then of people who did not feel comfortable with unmasking?
It was 207, which was 28%.
Okay.
So, I mean, obviously that's not saying that they would wear a mask necessarily, but you could probably assume that they would take that extra precaution. So.
And just to be clear for you in the community, masks are still required on transportation, on buses. So students who are riding buses under every scenario would have to wear a mask.
Yeah. Can I ask the student council reps for their opinion on acceptance of different habits of mask wearing? In my experience, I've seen kids, depending on the environment, they wear a mask or don't wear a mask. How concerned are you with people feeling ostracized or otherwise left out if they have to wear a mask or choose to wear a mask?
Well, people who decide to wear a mask, I don't think they feel ostracized that much, because if we look at the survey, 208 people wanted to wear a mask or wanted to keep the mask policy. So if 208 people wear a mask, like hypothetically, I don't think a lot of people are going to make ostracize them or discriminate against them, because that's quite a bit of students still in the high school. Even though it's like 28%, it's still like almost 1/3, almost. As per wearing a mask, if some people do not want to wear a mask and they just are mask optional, I don't think they would want to encourage other people to not wear a mask. I think they would just keep to themselves really, and not care about if someone else wears a mask, because it is their own right to wear a mask, yes or no. So I don't think that many kids will be ostracized or discriminating if they are wearing a mask.
I agree. I think that if you're wearing a mask as an extra precaution, I don't think you'll face any criticism or any sign of subtle why are you doing that. I think that is definitely not an issue I'm worried about, just being in school and seeing everyone's kind of thoughts on this whole thing. The only thing I would be worried about would be people who are wearing it because they aren't vaccinated would be my biggest concern. But like you said, even faculty won't have that information and students certainly won't, and it's impossible to tell just looking at someone. And given the fact that there are also 200 students who voted that they would not want the mask optional policy and would likely be wearing a mask, I don't think you'd be able to tell the 2% of students who are being required to wear it either.
Thank you.
Nurse Maine wants you to know that if you go to a Stop the Spread site, those COVID tests are free, and there's one at the Ashland train station.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, good. One group of people we haven't mentioned are the teachers. And the teachers' concerns. I don't know if we want to speak at all about that.
Well, I think the teachers were part of my concern, because there are teachers who have young children. And so I think, again, I feel like we're very close to having everybody have an opportunity to get a vaccine. So, and get a booster, which are two. The booster for me is also important, because just because I'm 100% vaccinated from last year's flu doesn't mean I'm vaccinated from flu now. There's a efficacy period for the vaccines. So I do worry about that. But when it comes to school, as Nancy brought up, I feel like we have to go to school. These kids, you don't get to make the choice about you're exposing yourself to a situation. Our schools are not, they're densely populated. we have a lot of kids in Hopkinton, and I, my gut tells me that we'll probably be fine, but I think the right thing to do is wait until everybody's had an opportunity. It's not like it's waiting forever. We could unmask and ruin a whole lot of family Thanksgivings because a lot, there are cases that come up and people can't travel to see their grandparents or whatever. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but we do know that there are available vaccines and boosters within the next month for everybody in our town. And and I just feel like if we wait until after the holiday travel season, then we'll get good data. Then we'll know.
So at this point, I feel pretty fine myself. I don't feel torn because I know that the state wasn't acting capriciously either when they made this policy, and they consulted with top scientists. And given the 98% vaccination rate in our 16 plus age group and 95% plus in the 12 to 15, and the cautiousness and care that our entire community has demonstrated over the past year and a half in all of their activities, curtailing play dates for young kids, everything. All of that together makes me comfortable making a motion, and certainly the superintendent's reflections influence my opinion too. And therefore, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the superintendent's recommendation to apply the state policy on mask off ramping in Hopkinton from November 1st to November 22nd. And I'd be seeking a second for that motion.
Thank you. Yep. Motion by Jill, and Dr. Kavanaugh has put up the wording of her recommendation for those who want to review it. Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Is there any discussion, any amendments, or discussion on the motion?
Sorry, I'm just reading the motion itself.
Oh, sorry. So I'll just read it for everyone's benefit. Establishing a trial period extending from November 1st through November 19th, mandating a return to universal masking on Monday, November 22nd, and voting in language to reinstate mandated masking at any time based on sharp rising cases. Dr. Kavanaugh, does that imply that you would unilaterally, without a school committee vote, be able to change to masking if the data mandated it, or are you asking us to have an emergency meeting to change the status?
An emergency meeting would be my first preference, but I think in the absence of that, I would work with the public health official.
Okay.
So I think I would like for it to say that emergency would be the first option.
Yeah, so all of those conditions are the motion I'm making.
Nancy, do you have any discussion?
It's been seconded.
We have a motion and there was a second by Meg. Do you have any discussion on it? Or are you good? Okay. I need to do a roll call vote because we have one member who is remote. So, Joe?
Aye.
Leah?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Nancy?
No.
And I'm a nay. So the motion passes 3-2. And there you go. Great.
All right,
I
thank you.
think that
Good
was excellent
discussion.
work, and thank you for all the work that you did to bring forward all the due diligence. And I also want to say a special thank you to our health director, Sean McAuliffe, who's been working really hard to get us the best information that he has at his disposal. Yes. He has a million things to do in his world, even things beyond COVID, believe it or not. And I think he's just really worked tirelessly to make sure that we all get the answers that we need to the questions that we have.
Yes, he's really, truly a dear colleague to me, so I want to extend the same thanks.
Nancy?
I would agree with that. I also just want to thank everybody for the respectful dialogue we had. I had expected that there was a good possibility it would be a divided vote, and I actually think that speaks to our commitment to representing our community in the wide variety of views. So,
okay. I think I have a job to do here. Now on to the next topic. Ms. Rothermick, the capital plan.
Are we actually expected to concentrate?
There's more on the agenda? What?
Really?
Need a break?
Just to be clear on the process, this is our first reading of the capital plan. There's no vote. This is our first opportunity to hear from the administration what elements are in the capital plan. So there's no vote being taken tonight. It's just, we're listening.
You can even speak in Greek, it will be fine.
Well, we'll try not to speak in Greek, and I've asked Tim Person to join as well. So, as Amanda said, this is just a presentation for you to digest, and the actual vote for the capital plan would be at the next meeting. So the first item on the capital plan is the high school auditorium stage and lighting upgrade. We had a company come in and actually do a review of the stage and the lighting. So what we're looking for is $325,000, and what that will do in the auditorium would be to install controllable cameras for performances and meetings. On the stage in the studio, replace and upgrade all the main electrical controls. Stage curtains and riggings, replace and repair the main curtains, travelers, battens, and border curtains. The stage lighting would be converted to LED with new wiring. And Hopkinton High School TV studio would also have new lighting for the TV studio. So the existing conditions, and this was outlined in the report that was done by the study as they went through and looked at everything. Some examples that came out of that report: the projection screen is improperly mounted on the lighting batten. The lighting fixtures mounted above the screen are on the same batten, and they're pointing down and resting on the screen. Some lights are hanging too close to the curtains. The curtains are aged and torn. We're unable to determine the last fireproofing treatment of those curtains. The dimming system is unable to handle the LED fixtures, and the HHS TV studio is connected to that same power supply. So any changes we make to the auditorium will affect the TV studio as well. So these are just some pictures of what our existing conditions are. So you can see in this picture where the light is actually hanging down on the same as the screen and hanging against the screen. Again, the curtains are torn, and these lighting controls will not work LED fixtures.
I would also add there, because of their age, you can't get parts for them anymore. So they're getting to be unrepairable.
So out of the report, they also produced a new lighting plan, and I just want to also say that the staff at the high school were also very involved. So anyone that's working with the performing arts, Mr. Hay, Mr. Brody, Ms. Von Rezenwein, Mr. Bishop, Mr. Person, and Mr. Ghosh were all part of this review as well. And this will give you an idea of some of what the new lighting would look like. And ironically, I was looking and admiring the lights that are here at the HCAM studio would be similar, updated LED fixtures.
Excuse me, Ms. Rotherman, do you
Yes.
want questions with each article, or do you want us to hear the whole thing?
No, that's fine. If you want to go item by item, that's fine.
Okay, any clarifying questions on the high school auditorium?
Does anybody else before I go?
Go ahead.
Okay. You've all been at town meeting, and there's a resident, Jeff Doherty, who always comments on the sound in the auditorium. I think he's commenting on sound. I know he's commenting on something. I can't remember what, but it's very important, right? But are his concerns addressed? Is it sound he's usually worried about? Remember he had a
I believe
high
those
school.
are in the middle.
That's in the middle school.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah. So we don't have any. This is all lighting and
This
stage, not sound system.
This is all within the high school.
Within the high school. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Do you have any idea when this last got an overhaul?
This is original equipment.
Okay. I mean, I
Wow.
think, yeah. this
Well,
is-
20 years ago. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah,
State of the art 20 years ago.
yeah.
So, and you can tell that over the years, they probably added things, which is why you have things hanging improperly on different battens and too close to screen. So, you know, they added things over the years, but for the most part, it is the original installation.
Okay, move on, thank you.
Okay. The next piece that we're looking at is replacing district-wide the IDF switches. And just so everyone knows, an intermediate distribution frame, IDF, is a freestanding or wall-mounted rack for managing and interconnecting the telecommunications cable between the end-user devices and the main distribution frame. And this will replace about half of the IDF switches in the district at a cost of $75,000. And this is part of a regular end-of-life replacement plan.
How long is the usual end-of-life replacement plan cycle? Like 2-3 years for this type of equipment?
No, it is longer. So it depends on the pieces of equipment. I believe these may be around 7 years.
Oh, okay.
Wetlands order of conditions. This is one that is most likely familiar to the committee. Again, the ask is for $60,000. This is to increase the amount of wetlands, and this was required as a part of the original installation of the high school fields when those were built. So in 2019, the full cost of the project of $100,000 was requested and approved by the school committee, but it was cut for town meeting down to $40,000. So this additional appropriation will get to the cost of the project. And just as a reminder, when we were doing the turf field, these order of conditions get attached. So it makes it difficult to do other things if the track is to ever come forward. These are the items that need to be completed before they will allow you to move forward on another project. So this could potentially hang up future renovations out in the fields. Air handling unit replacements. This is for a cost of $475,000. The air handling unit replacements will be for one each at the high school and the middle school. The high school unit controls the common areas and the middle school unit controls the auditorium. And again, this is part of a regular end-of-life replacement plan. Then we get into alternative energy, and some of these you will remember from previous presentations. When we're looking at the capital plan in this area, what we're looking at is how to get at that budget for utilities. Both the electric and the gas in the operating budget add up to over $1 million. So when we look at that number, solar and battery storage projects is the next look. And we've talked before about potential. So for solar, we're looking at the Hopkinton Middle School roof and a parking lot canopy, at the high school roof and the bus lot canopy, Hopkins roof, and the Marathon Elementary front parking lot canopy. And there would be battery storage opportunity at both the middle and the high school. And just as a reminder that we already have battery storage at Marathon, and the size of the installation for Hopkins, the battery storage doesn't quite work for that. So looking at these individually, this is the Hopkinton Middle School roof and the battery storage. The solar production would be 418,000 kilowatts. The cost is $1.2 million. The 1 year operating budget impact is $64,000. And if the cash flow for this would be $94,000 in year one. So you look at a lifetime operating budget impact, 25 years of 1.9 million and a cash flow of 1.3 million. The middle school, the parking lot canopy would be the parking lot over by the water towers through the center. And again, the cost would be 1.2 million. The year one operating budget impact would be $48,000 and the cash flow of $84,000. The high school roof and battery storage at a cost of $1 million. The operating budget impact would be $56,000 year one and cash flow of $78,000 in year one. The bus lot canopy of $1.2 million, and the array was positioned on the outsides here, particularly to not impede the flow of the buses coming in and turning. Year one operating budget impact, $48,000. Year one cash flow is $85,000. The Hopkins roof, again, this is a smaller array, cost of $440,000. Operating budget impact of $26,000. Year one cash flow of $31,000. And the Marathon, the front lot parking lot, at a cost of $1 million. Year one operating budget impact of $40,000. Year one cash flow of $75,000. So the goal of all of these projects is to install alternative energy sources to impact the operating budget, but also generate revenue to pay for the projects. Again, the goal is to make this taxpayer neutral and to create a more sustainable operating budget moving forward.
So can I ask a question really quick?
Yeah.
So when we do projects like this, usually we go to like town meeting, right? And it's a loan. We get a loan to do the project.
Correct.
So to make it taxpayer neutral, is the idea that the payment for the loan will be equivalent somewhat to what we're getting back from the solar power? Is that the thought?
In the cash flow, that's correct.
Okay.
So looking at this, to your point, Leah, and it's kind of a lot going through all those projects. So here's a summary of all the projects put together. So the project cost of all of those, if you were to opt to do all of them, is $6.2 million. The 25-year operating budget impact is $8.3 million, and your lifetime cash flow for 25 years is $7 million. So you can see here, your $7 million covers your 6.2. So that's the goal, is to make that cash flow pay for that loan.
And then the operating savings is actually lowering of the budget needs because we're getting solar to power everything, so we don't have to pay the electrical, etc.
Well, so as you remember from Dr. Kavanaugh's presentation of where our enrollment is going, the hope is to be able to save in utilities and be able to put it back into the classroom.
Perfect. Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah, exciting. I wanted to get clarification on the cash flow part of the revenue generation. Does that include the renewable energy credits that the town gets back? That money is included there too?
That's what this would be.
Okay, okay. But does it then, it also includes the energy savings then too, right? I mean, we're spending less on our utility bill because we're generating ourselves, plus we're getting renewable energy credits.
Correct. So if you look at it holistically, it's the $8 million plus the $7 million. So it's really a $15 million impact.
Great. Now I understand both columns. Thanks.
Right.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
So as an alternative, so what I presented was to actually outright buy. What we have done in other solar installations is using that power purchase agreement, and that's what we have at the middle school and high school roof right now. So again, the capital purchase would be that $6.2 million, the lifetime revenue of $7 million, and the operating budget of $8 million. The other alternative is to do a power purchasing agreement where the cost is zero. Obviously, the lifetime revenue is also zero because we do not own the system. But there is still a budget savings of $3.5 million that you could take out over the life of those projects. So again, looking at it from a summary point of view, you have the auditorium stage and lighting of $325,000, the IDF switches at $75,000, the wetlands order of conditions for $60,000, the air handling units at $475,000, potential purchase of the solar and battery storage at $6.2 million for the total capital request of $7.222. Looking at it from a revenue offset, the $6.2 million would be completely offset, making the taxpayer cost of this plan $935,000. If we were to look at it through a power purchase agreement, it would be those same items up top, the solar and battery storage. Of course, the cost would be zero. The revenue offset is not applicable. You end up with that same number as a taxpayer impact.
So power purchase agreement is where you don't actually own.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we just put solar in our home and did all that research and, okay. Thank you very much. That's all I needed to know.
That's it.
Questions? Are there other questions? Nancy, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions right now. Thank you.
Meg?
I appreciate the thorough report, though.
Yes. No, I'm really excited by the idea of this. Like, this is totally awesome. Like, the idea of finding the energy from the really hot parking lots and actually creating shade while doing it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's great. That's a really great use of that space. So.
But one of the things that we also talk about for the bus parking lot, the difficulty of clearing snow. So if you have a solar canopy that is now actually over all the buses, the drivers have to show up at 4:30 in the morning and pull all the snow off the roof, pull forward, because now there's 2 feet of snow in between every bus, clear that. So, I mean, this just makes managing that parking lot winter conditions much better as well.
Other questions? The only question I have is, I love this. I love the green dynamic and everything. I'm still having some sticker shock with that enrollment number, and I know it's 2032, but I'm wondering about parking, traffic flow. I'm wondering about the stuff that happens with cars around the schools, and I'm not sure that our current traffic flow and our current parking lots, or even our current bus lot, given how crowded the buses are, the buses are full often and more kids are coming. So, I just wonder, have we thought about if we have to add, 3 more buses, or if we have to change the traffic flow around the school? Are there any sections of this solar plan that would be better to do after we have more clarity? I'm not sure we're going to touch the marathon, so the one over the marathon lot, or maybe even the water towers lot is kind of stable, we'll say. I don't know. But as we think about traffic solutions, and I don't see a project here to look at traffic, I know we had done a traffic study a few years ago prior to the bus lot, but I just know the community is experiencing a lot of challenges with traffic, and I know that we're going to have more humans in Hopkinton as time goes forward. So I just wasn't sure if there was any of this that might give you concern, that maybe in that light we might not recommend, I don't know, the high school lot maybe, or some space that might become a new traffic flow.
Well, I would say that the bus lot would not change. So even adding additional buses in there would not change. And again, you push those solar systems out to the edges.
Yep.
With the water tower lot, that's going through the middle. So even changing traffic flow in any degree would not interfere with where those are. So I don't see those, and all the rest are on the roof installations.
Right. No, it's the parking lot ones. I was wondering, I think the study that you had commissioned maybe 4 years ago now, was pretty pretty blank slate. I mean, so they were looking at different ways of using where the tennis courts are, where they, you know,
Right.
just because there are all sorts of concerns. So if we, and I guess my second question is there any need in our capital plan to do anything that might, to add a project onto the capital plan that would help us with traffic or traffic flow or anything? Because I know this is just such a challenge.
So I would say, I think as Dr. Kavanaugh had spoke about earlier, as we go through the feasibility study for the Elmwood School, our plan is to do a district-wide kind of feasibility study, which would take into account traffic flows and all that stuff. So I think that's kind of why we've steered away from it, that's the word, steered away from it a little bit here in this capital plan, because we know we have that feasibility study coming up. And how all that kind of works out in the next couple of years is gonna help us. I don't think there's a short-term fix that we're gonna come up with for our traffic problems in one quick sitting. I think it's gonna be a big kind of plan that we have to come up with. Also taking into factor, you know, what the schools could look like in the next 10 years as well.
Yeah, that's fair.
So there is also a grant that I'm looking into. It's the Safe Routes to School.
Oh, yeah.
So typically their grants are really around signage. When I looked into this one further, it is an infrastructure grant. So I'm gonna look into that, if we can apply for them to update what we did in terms of our traffic studies, in addition to the fact of the enrollment that we're looking at. There isn't a guarantee that we would get the grant. The other part to that is really looking at trying to increase the sidewalks around the schools. So where we would get money, or if we would get money, we don't know.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
And I think the other, for the bus lot, we have opportunity to add buses into that lot in its current configuration.
We
So-
still do. Okay, so I know I think we added from the original count and we still have capacity. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. It is exciting. Love it. And, you know, all this discussion, the fact that our district is looking to be green and take into account anything we can do to help the environment and help the budget. It's all good. Nothing else on that? We have an intent to travel from the Robo-Hillers robotics team.
Yes, you'll remember the Robo-Hillers have visited us here to show off their winnings. So they are looking for your approval to travel to the World Tournament. They'll be leaving Hopkinton on the 9th of May and returning on the 12th. They'd be going to Dallas, Texas. Pat Allen is the chaperone for that. And, you know, this is for grades 6 to 8.
That's great.
Yep. So moved.
Second.
A motion by Leah, second by Meg, and I'll do a roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Leah?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, and that passes. Okay, and now we have policy IJ, instructional materials, first reading. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, what we've really done with the instructional materials policy is, you know, we pulled it out just because it hadn't been looked at in a very, very long time. And I think we were also looking at the curriculum policy recently, and so these two are clearly related. What we did was we really kind of looked at the MASC policy, and we looked at our policy, and somehow the number 1 and number 7 felt a little bit redundant. So we very simply, with Mrs. Parsons' recommendation to do this actually, took 1 and 7, kind of married them, and created a brand new 1 and eliminated 7.
So just to be clear, the one that's in the packet is the existing policy?
What we had and what MASC had were very, very similar. I think, I'm not sure if I can
This is
actually
from the
remember
packet, yeah.
if this is the one
It's
that's
red.
MASC.
The wrong
Oh,
one
it's
is in the
edited
packet.
in the packet.
Yes, so when you see the red,
I don't know where, this was from the previous version.
In the packet?
Okay.
Yes, but we
Oh,
have the
This was in the
file
directory.
Exactly.
So the
that's
existing
right.
policy was in the directory,
Correct.
The
and
packet,
the
not
edited
this.
version is in the packet. Excellent,
Yeah,
all right.
Sorry.
yes, so where you
Thank
see
you.
the red
Thanks.
lining, those are the only changes that have been made.
Okay.
Jen, do you remember if it was MASC's that looked like this, or if it was ours that looked like this? One of them had an additional letter there, and it might have been, we added the number 1 here. That's okay, I don't remember either. But obviously, this must be ours if this is if we're amending it to look that way. So I don't remember what MASCs look like.
That's
exactly.
okay, yeah, so I see the proposed edits, and I
Yes.
have the original too, so I see the difference, all right. So can we take questions on this? Do you want questions?
Please,
Okay.
yeah, well, it's a first reading, so
First
my
reading, so I know we don't
recommendation
go
would be
too
not
far.
to vote it.
Yeah, no. But when I look at these, like, the one thing that, so instructional materials, I'm thinking like printouts, books, online material, stuff like that, right? So I sometimes wonder, like, if my kids even have books anymore. So I don't know if we have a preference as a school committee. Like, this is saying that, we're deferring to the experts, of course, but because instructional programs and material are of great importance, only those that meet the following criteria should be approved by the committee. I don't see anything in here like that says whether we prefer book or electronic. Maybe we don't want to have a preference on that. And I don't see anything even on like quality stand. Is there any kind of quality standard body for educational materials? There's no reference to that. Those are the 2 things I thought of. All these things are nice. There was some redundancy, so I'm all in favor of cleaning it up. But to me, they're like extras on top of the curriculum. At a core, I want to make sure our curriculum is really strong, and the educational materials are great. And then all this stuff is really important to layer on top of the quality instruction and the content. But, so I guess my real question is, like, how well has this been working, and what difficulties is it causing? I know sometimes we create policies, and then Mrs. Parsons in this situation having to implement this stuff. How hard does it get?
Sure is. So I think you just asked a lot of questions, but so for sure we have textbooks and we have resources that we're using in the district, and in many cases, a lot of our textbooks at the high school level, especially, either are moving to an exclusively online format, or you guys can speak to this too, or we have a combination of textbooks and online references. The online version is usually fairly economical, and we usually buy those with, let's say, a 6-year license. And so that's something that, we're committing to, and we know our students can access the materials in a way that won't break their backs in terms of back and forth to and from school, in a way that they can actually access activities from the text as well as the reading itself. We stick with the text that we have until we get to a point where somebody from the school side of things, usually it's one of our curriculum leaders, will come and say, we've had a discussion, this text series is no longer working for us, we need to make some shifts. And then we have a process that we follow in terms of how we actually look at new options with numbers of questions and different ways of vetting the materials. There are also professional resources that we do use and consult when we're looking at text, ways that educational organizations will rate texts and resources and things like that. So we use a combination of things like that. We also consult with other area districts and colleagues. There's a lot of collegial discussion among assistant superintendents and curriculum directors, what's worked for you, that kind of thing. So there is a lot of thought that goes into anything that's brand new, or any potential shifts that are being made.
Would it be important or not helpful for us to include something that you're already doing it? So you have consultants providing analysis of the quality of the content, but we don't have anything in here that requires you to do that,
I think that's really interesting, and I don't think I thought of it when I looked at this. And something about, at a high level, about the quality of the materials themselves, as opposed to just what they represent and what they teach. Maybe a sentence or so. I think we can go back and talk about this.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's very hard to define.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I worry about being able to find language adequate to that task. I think instead we say that these will help students develop abilities in critical reading and writing. They'll stimulate growth in these ways. So we are geared towards what the students will be able to glean from these texts, but we're not here to judge the quality, whatever that means. I mean, there's so many debates about quality.
No,
I think
yeah.
It's a quagmire.
Sure, I respect your advice, especially from your profession, and you're in this field. But on the school committee, do we want our policy to kind of map over? We're hearing that there's already procedures in place to inspect quality, right? And I'm just suggesting that maybe our policy should state that too.
I like what you're saying. I wonder if there's a way to say.
Sorry, I just wanted to finish one thing. Is like in that statement about what was it, critical thinking and reading skills? Like, yes, of course, but if it's like chemistry or calculus or something like that, like there is some kind of standard. Well, is this good? Are these good problems for? I don't want us to put this layer of stuff as our policy only, and then they can't get the best quality calculus book because it didn't have all 7 of these things. So I'm just wondering if we put the quality in here too, then they'd have to balance that, Sorry, Amanda, that's all.
No, I interrupted you, I'm sorry. No, so it's interesting, I forget what came forward last year. It might have been language or maybe science materials. I'd asked, by what process were these selected? And Ms. Parson was kind enough to indulge me and explain how the curriculum is vetted, and it's like 12 times more thorough than I could ever imagine. Yeah. So I'm wondering if maybe a phrase in here that says something to the effect of and vetted according to the established procedure by the district administration, or something that implies that there is a procedure and a process, but we leave it up to our administrator to define it like we do with many other things. Mm-hmm. So I think you're right. I think something is missing, but I think our curriculum lead is responsible and held accountable for the curriculum. So I think leading that to the curriculum lead.
Yeah, maybe it's as simple as, will not be approved by the committee without one having passed through the, curriculum or review or whatever it was. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's all.
Nancy, did you have any comments on IJ?
Nope. Thank you.
As I mentioned, it's a first reading, so maybe we can think about how to incorporate the concept.
Yeah. That's good.
That sounds fair. Thank you.
It's a little bit late, so I'm wondering, Nancy, what you want to do with the school committee goals. But I'll pass it to you, Ms. Kavanaugh.
So, it's later for you than it is for me. But it does seem like maybe we would be better off putting some of the goals themselves off. I hate to go too far just because it keeps coming at the end and keeps getting bumped up against time limit. But in terms of being respectful of people's time, do we want to look at the policy and then talk about doing a workshop related to goals down the road?
Mm-hmm. I think that would work. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'd be eager to talk about that workshop, trying to set it up.
Just a dedicated time.
I think it would be really useful.
Yes.
Yeah. We could also have an executive session at that point to worry about all of the minutes we have to approve too. We could do it all in once.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to skip that agenda item and we'll just finish with our old business policy BA. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, so you can see there's no red lines. I think when we looked at this on August 12th, we were probably in the same frame of mind that we are right now. And so I think we took a look at it and we said, well, we always bring it back for a second reading. So this is it. This is the second reading. And I also wondered a little bit about, did we, it's sort of a chicken and egg kind of thing. Did we want to look at this within the context of your process of goal setting? And I don't know the answer to that question.
I think it's okay to pass this without actually going through the goal setting itself. But we could also, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because it's not going to take us long, I don't think, to go through either way.
So I wasn't able to attend the August 12th reading, so I apologize, but I do have a question or input on this as drafted.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the very first sentence, like I love to start with a really clear sentence, and that first sentence is like so carefully worded that I'm not sure what it's trying to say and not say. And I think our mission should be really clear. You know, the schools are here, the community set up these schools so that we could educate our children in the schools, right? And if there's a way we can make that a clear statement up front and not be shy about saying it, because it says now the school committee is responsible to the people for whose benefit the school district has been established. And I'm left wondering who those people are. But I think I know who they are. They're the students, and maybe we could just say that. Or if that's just so superfluous, maybe we just delete the whole sentence. It just seemed like an awkward way to start.
And my only, sort of wordsmithing, but I know there are members of the community who don't appreciate sometimes the word citizen, because we do have residents who are not citizens. So I just would ask if we could change the word citizen to resident.
Yep, that's great. Yeah.
We've been
Which
catching
sentence
that
is
a
that
lot,
in?
but I guess we missed it here. It's
It's
in the
fourth-
third sentence.
Third
Yeah.
sentence, yeah.
I mean, in theory, I'm okay with, in terms of the chicken egg question, I'm personally okay with passing this before we do the goals. I mean, it doesn't, to me, we could do it in either order.
But does anybody else agree with me on that edit?
I do, actually.
Okay, yeah.
That first sentence in
So
particular.
we wouldn't be
So
voting
we're not
tonight.
passing it before the goals anyway.
Can I ask, do we want to then let our policy working group or pass this along to them and bring it back
Yeah,
at the same time that we do the workshop?
Sounds good.
sure.
Okay.
And let us know if you have other comments.
Okay,
on
I think that
this.
was it, but I'll take another look, yeah.
Okay, that brings us to future agenda items.
Well, I guess when are we meeting next?
The next meeting is November 8th.
Okay.
On a
so-
Monday.
Huh?
It's a Monday.
It's a Monday.
Yeah.
For
Right,
budget reasons.
because of the Thursday holidays, we had moved so that we don't get behind with our budget stuff.
Do we have a meeting the following week too? Because I know that we were getting to a point where we had meetings.
18th. 8 and 18. I think December has 3.
We have the 1 week, I think, is Veterans Day, probably the week of the 8th, and the week of after the 18th would be Thanksgiving, the Thursday.
Okay. I think it's probably obvious, but the 8th and 18th, just, updates on how the trial's going and what we're seeing. That would be my only request. But like I said, I figure that's probably already in the books.
Okay. Items by consensus. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, Superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Meg, second by Leah. Roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Leah?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. And that brings us to adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Meg, second by Leah.
Aye.
Joe? Leah?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, and we are adjourned at 9:24. I want to thank you both for your efforts with the survey and for coming tonight.
Yeah.
Nancy,
So nice
thank you
to
for
have
dialing
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
Thank
Great
you.
that you're-
It
Patience
worked out
with me
really
at,
well.
not there.
Thank you.
Nighty night.